He watched his balance vanish until the bank president himself returned every cent of his life's work. The receipt trembled between Harold Dawson's weathered fingers as he squinted at the numbers. Many years of careful saving, and now the ATM screen showed a balance of $17.32. His throat tightened, a silent vice of panic. This can't be right. Not after 40 years in the Navy, not after everything. He jabbed the withdrawal button again, hoping for a different answer, but the machine only blinked the same devastating truth back at him. The weight of his service medals seemed to press against his chest through the pocket of his neatly pressed jacket. Harold had worn them today, something he did only for important occasions, because he'd planned to discuss opening a college fund for his granddaughter. Instead, he now stood paralyzed before the glowing screen, the chill of the bank's air conditioning seeping through his thin cotton shirt. Around him, customers moved in a blur of motion and sound, oblivious to the collapse of his world. "Mr. Dawson?" The young teller's voice cut through his stupor. "Is everything all right, sir?" Her name tag read Melissa, and concern etched fine lines around her eyes. Harold squared his shoulders, a reflex from decades of naval discipline, and approached her window. His knuckles whitened around his checkbook, the leather worn thin from years of careful entries. He wouldn't break down. Not here, not now. "There's been a mistake," he managed, voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "My account, it's empty." The words hung between them, impossible and awful. Harold slid his ID across the polished counter, along with the bank card that had until yesterday safeguarded his retirement, his future, his security. Melissa's fingers flew across her keyboard, the click-clack rhythm like distant machine gun fire in Harold's ears. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed what he already knew. "Sir, there were several large withdrawals yesterday. Wire transfers." She lowered her voice, glancing around before continuing. "They appear to be authorized with your security information." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Harold's sensible brown shoes. The investment advisor. The one who called about government bonds for veterans. The one who seemed to know so much about Navy pension plans. "I didn't authorize anything," Harold whispered, each word sharp as broken glass in his throat. Melissa reached for her phone, pressing a single button while maintaining eye contact with him. "Mr. Dawson, please wait here. I'm calling our security officer." The overhead light suddenly seemed too bright, exposing his vulnerability, the shame of having been fooled. He'd survived 3 deployments, a war, the loss of his wife to cancer, but this violation threatened to break him in ways combat never had. The security officer appeared within minutes, a former police detective named Ramirez, who recognized Harold from his monthly visits. "Let's go somewhere private, sir," he suggested, guiding Harold toward a small conference room with smoked glass walls. Harold felt the stares of other customers burning into his back as they walked. "They know. They can see I've been taken for a fool." His military pension would keep him from starving, but the cushion he'd built over decades, gone in an electronic instant. Ramirez spread the transaction records across the table, 6 withdrawals in 90 minutes, each hitting different internal approval channels to avoid security flags. "It's sophisticated," Ramirez explained, pointing to routing numbers in Delaware, then Singapore, then Estonia. "They knew exactly how our safeguards work." Harold stared at the papers, seeing not numbers but vanished dreams, the boat he'd promised himself after retirement, the college funds for his grandchildren, the security of knowing he would never burden his daughter with his care. "Can you get it back?" Harold asked, hating how his voice cracked on the final word. Ramirez didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Instead, he stepped outside, speaking in hushed tones to someone in the hallway. Through the glass, Harold watched as Melissa gestured emphatically, pointing toward the executive offices on the upper floor. A decision was being made about him, about his life, while he sat helpless. When Ramirez returned, his expression had shifted subtly. "Mr. Dawson, the branch manager wants to speak with you," and he hesitated. "Mr. Harrington is being notified." Harold blinked, the name not registering immediately. Then it clicked. Lawrence Harrington, the regional president of First National, whose signature appeared on every bank statement. Why would they bother him with one old man's problem? Harold wondered, even as Ramirez led him deeper into the building, past offices he'd never seen in his 20 years as a customer. They stopped before an imposing door at the corridor's end. Harold's reflection stared back at him from the polished brass plate beside it, a vault entrance, not for money but for records, with the bank's insignia prominently displayed. And there, etched into the smaller plate beneath it, was his own name, Dawson, Harold J. Mie. Account hash 7834290. Ramirez placed his security card against the scanner, and Harold heard the heavy lock disengage with a solemn, fateful click. The vault door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing not a traditional bank vault, but a crisis management room. 3 people rose from leather chairs arranged around a gleaming conference table. The branch manager, a woman in a sharp suit that Harold recognized as the bank's counsel, and a man whose face had appeared in local business journals and bank advertisements. Lawrence Harrington, regional president of First National Bank, moved with surprising quickness for his substantial frame, extending his hand to Harold before anyone else could speak. "Mr. Dawson, I'm deeply sorry about what's happened," Harrington said, his grip firm and unwavering. "Please, sit down." The chair they offered faced a wall of screens displaying Harold's account information in merciless detail, 42 years of banking history, from his first deposit after military discharge to yesterday's catastrophic hemorrhage of funds. Harold lowered himself stiffly, feeling every one of his 67 years as the leather cushion received him. His service medals clinked softly in his pocket. "We've been analyzing the attack vector," the lawyer explained, sliding documents across the polished surface. "The scammers used information from a data breach at the Veterans Administration 3 months ago. Your military service record, social security number, and banking history were all compromised." Harold's mouth went dry. "Even my service betrayed me." He thought of the confidential papers he'd signed in 1972, the government's promise that his information would remain secure, another broken vow. Harrington dismissed the technical explanation with an impatient wave. "What matters is what we're going to do about it." He turned to face Harold directly, studying the older man's face with unexpected intensity. "You've banked with us since 1982, Mr. Dawson. The first branch you used doesn't even exist anymore. It's a coffee shop now." A ghost of a smile touched Harold's lips despite everything. He remembered that little branch, how the teller had helped him set up his first savings account when he knew nothing about civilian banking. The screens behind Harrington suddenly shifted, displaying a map with glowing lines tracing from Pittsburgh to points across the globe. "Our cybersecurity team is tracking the money," the branch manager explained. "We've frozen what we could, but most transfers have already cleared through shell accounts." The red lines multiplied like blood vessels, spreading and dividing until they disappeared into digital oblivion. Harold watched his life savings disperse into the ether, his throat tight with unshed tears. Harrington's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "Excuse us for a moment," the executives filed out, leaving Harold alone with the screens that chronicled his loss. The sudden silence amplified the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears. "What happens now? Do I sell the house? Cancel Christmas presents for the grandkids?" His fingers traced the outline of his service medals through the fabric of his jacket, symbols of sacrifice that couldn't protect him from this new invisible enemy. Through the glass wall, Harold watched Harrington engaged in an intense conversation with the bank's counsel. The lawyer shook her head emphatically, pointing to documents on her tablet. Harrington's face hardened, his back straightening in a way that reminded Harold of officers preparing to override orders. Whatever was being discussed, it was clearly contentious. The regional president jabbed his finger at the tablet, then at Harold through the glass, his expression brooking no argument. When they returned, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Harrington sat directly across from Harold, leaning forward with elbows on the table. "Mr. Dawson, there are protocols for fraud cases. There's a claims process, an investigation period. It typically takes weeks, sometimes months, and recovery is," he hesitated, "often partial at best." Harold nodded slowly, resigned to the bureaucratic maze ahead, already calculating which possessions he could sell first. However, Harrington continued, his voice dropping to a more personal register. "I've made a different decision today." He turned to the bank counsel, who reluctantly placed a form before Harold. "This is a complete restoration of your account, effective immediately. Every dollar that was taken will be replaced by close of business today." Harold stared at the document, unable to comprehend the words. The amount listed matched his life savings to the penny, $347,892.16. "I don't understand," Harold whispered, his fingers hovering over the paper, as if it might dissolve at his touch. "The money's gone. You said you couldn't recover it." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Harrington's gaze never wavered. "The bank is absorbing the loss," Harrington stated simply. "We're not waiting for insurance claims or recovery efforts. Your money goes back now." He slid a pen across the table. "I need your signature acknowledging the restoration." Harold's hand trembled as he reached for the pen, his vision blurring. Before he could sign, Harrington added quietly, "This isn't standard procedure, Mr. Dawson, but neither is 42 years of loyalty, and neither is serving your country for half a lifetime." The document awaited his signature, the pen heavy in his hand. Through the glass wall, Harold could see bank staff gathering, curious about the unprecedented meeting. The weight of Harrington's decision hung in the air between them, a corporate executive choosing a path that likely violated a dozen policies. The regional president checked his watch, then looked up with quiet determination. "The system needs 9 minutes to process the restoration. Shall we begin?" The computer hummed as commands were entered, each keystroke bringing Harold's financial life back from oblivion. The branch manager's fingers moved with practiced precision across the keyboard, while Harrington stood watch, arms crossed over his broad chest. No one spoke. The only sounds were the soft click of keys and Harold's measured breathing as he struggled to maintain composure. "Don't break down now. Not in front of these people. Not when they're doing this for you." On the main screen, a progress bar inched forward with excruciating slowness. 12%, 18%, 23%. Harold found himself counting his heartbeats between percentage points, a technique he'd used during long watches aboard ship. The lawyer kept checking her phone, clearly uncomfortable with the unprecedented action unfolding before her. "The board will have questions," she murmured to Harrington, who simply nodded without shifting his attention from the screen. "Mr. Dawson," Harrington said quietly, still watching the progress bar, "may I ask what you were saving for?" The question caught Harold off guard. In the Navy, officers rarely inquired about personal matters, but Harrington's tone held genuine curiosity, not perfunctory politeness. Harold cleared his throat, suddenly conscious of how important his answer felt. "Started for retirement," he replied, his voice steadier now. "Then for my late wife's medical bills. Then," he paused, memories washing over him, "for my grandchildren. 3 of them. The oldest starts college next fall." He didn't mention how he'd planned to surprise his daughter with the tuition check, relieving the burden she'd been carrying as a single mother. Didn't mention the promise he'd made to his dying wife that their grandchildren would have opportunities neither of them had known. The progress bar reached 51% as a soft chime sounded from the computer. "First phase complete," the branch manager announced. "Account structure restored." Harold leaned forward, watching as his account history reappeared on screen. Decades of careful deposits, strategic investments, the disciplined saving of a man who had learned the value of preparation during years at sea. For the first time since entering the bank that morning, he felt the faintest glimmer of hope. 7 minutes remaining, Harrington noted, glancing at his watch again. "Mr. Dawson, when this is complete, we should discuss additional security measures for your account." The regional president's tone had shifted from compassionate to practical, and Harold appreciated the change. He didn't want pity, he wanted solutions. "We can set up specialized alerts, verification protocols, make sure this never happens again." A knock at the door interrupted them. Melissa, the teller who had first noticed Harold's distress, entered with a folder clutched to her chest. "Sir," she addressed Harrington, "the main office is asking about the emergency override." Her eyes darted nervously to Harold, then back to her boss. "Mr. Winters from Corporate Security is on line 1. He says the transaction needs board approval and..." Tell Mr. Winters, I'll call him back in 10 minutes. Harrington cut in, his voice level but firm. This restoration continues as directed. Melissa nodded quickly and retreated, the door closing softly behind her. Harold watched Harrington's profile, recognizing the expression of a man making a career-defining choice. The kind of decision that might appear in a performance review, or perhaps a resignation letter. The progress bar reached 78% as the overhead lights flickered briefly. For a heart-stopping moment, Harold feared a power failure would interrupt the process, leaving his account in digital limbo. But the systems hummed back to life immediately, the backup generators engaging with barely a pause. Secure power engaged, the branch manager confirmed. No data loss. Harold released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. 3 minutes, Harrington announced, moving to stand beside Harold's chair. When this is complete, Miss Chen will print new account statements for you to take home. He placed a hand briefly on the older man's shoulder, a gesture so unexpected that Harold had to blink rapidly against sudden moisture in his eyes. Your money was entrusted to this institution, Mr. Dawson. That trust was violated. Not by you, but by criminals who exploited our systems and your service record. The progress bar reached 94% as activity in the main bank lobby became visible through the glass walls. Customers were being directed to other tellers, staff moving with the heightened awareness that comes when executives are present. Through the hushed commotion, Harold noticed several employees glancing toward the room, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and respect. Word had spread about what was happening. Complete, the branch manager finally announced as the progress bar filled and vanished. In its place, a simple message appeared: account restoration successful. Harold stared at the screen, then at the printed statement the manager placed before him. The numbers aligned perfectly with his memory, every dollar back where it belonged, as if the theft had never occurred. His hand trembled as he reached for the paper, the culmination of a lifetime's work restored in 9 minutes by one man's decision. Harrington extended his hand, and Harold rose to shake it, military bearing automatically straightening his spine, despite the emotional tremors still running through him. Thank you doesn't seem adequate, Harold managed, his voice rough with feeling. The regional president simply nodded, understanding in his eyes. Your account has new security protocols, Harrington explained, walking Harold toward the door. And my direct number should you ever need it. He pressed a business card into Harold's hand as they stepped into the main lobby, where a hush fell over waiting customers. The elderly veteran clutched his restored bank statement against the pocket containing his service medals, two symbols of different forms of protection now reunited. As Harold moved toward the exit, dignity restored alongside his savings, he heard the soft rustle of papers behind him. Turning, he saw Harrington personally handing updated account information to the tellers, ensuring everyone knew that Harold Dawson's life savings, every hard-earned dollar, had been made whole again by the bank that had failed to protect it. The whispered appreciation of waiting customers followed him like a gentle wave as the glass doors closed behind him, his reflection no longer that of a victim, but of a man whose worth had been recognized beyond the numbers in his account.